Okay, so just 6 months back, DeepSeek really made some waves in the AI world.
It certainly did.
But now, another Chinese company, well, they've made a move that's sending, I'd say, shockwaves. We're talking Kimi K2, a trillion parameter AI model. And get this, it's not only outperforming Western giants like, say, Claude 4 Sonnet on things like creativity, coding, even emotional intelligence.
Which is fascinating in itself.
Right. But it's doing it at, what, 1/12 the cost? Astonishing.
Yeah.
And it's a completely open source.
Completely. It feels like what DeepSeek hinted at, Kimi K2, is basically confirming.
Yeah.
China isn't just, catching up in AI anymore.
They might actually be pulling ahead.
It seems that way. And this isn't just about another big model hitting the scene. It's really about the person behind it, too.
Yeah.
A 31-year-old researcher, Yang Zhilin, and his company, Moonshot AI.
Right.
They seem to have tackled and actually solved some fundamental training problems.
Oh.
Problems that have frankly stumped the biggest names in the industry for a while. Issues previously thought almost intractable.
Welcome to the deep dive. Our mission today really is to unpack this. It's a truly significant development. We're going to dig into who Yang Zhilin is, what these revolutionary technical hurdles were that he overcame, hurdles that vexed the big tech companies.
And the implications, of course. Performance, economics.
Exactly. The disruptive performance, the economic side of Kimi K2, and yeah, the bigger picture, the profound geopolitical questions this all raises for the future of global AI. We're aiming to give you a shortcut, basically, to understanding what this fundamental shift means for everyone, developers, business leaders, anyone interested in AI. So to really get the scale of Kimi K2, you almost have to start with the person, the visionary behind it. So who is this 31-year-old genius making such substantial waves across the AI landscape?
Well, Yang Zhilin's credentials.
Yeah.
They're, frankly, astonishing. You look at his Google Scholar page, over 33,000 citations. That's a really remarkable figure in AI research.
Wow.
He was the first author on foundational papers, things like Transformer XL and XLNet. These really shaped modern natural language processing, modern NLP. And they were among the very first models in the Hugging Face Transformers library, which, is huge.
So he's been foundational for a while.
Absolutely. PhD from Carnegie Mellon, studying under Russell Kudinoff. He had early experience at Google Brain, Meta AI too, before he returned to China. It's fair to say that pretty much every time you interact with a modern AI, you're kind of building on the foundations he helped lay.
That's a staggering track record. But what I find equally compelling is his vision for Moonshot AI. He described it as combining, I think the quote was, OpenAI's technology idealism with ByteDance's business philosophy.
That's a potent mix.
It really sounds like it. Ambitious, cutting-edge research, but with a sharp eye on, commercialization. And even the company name Moonshot, right? Inspired by Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon.
Yeah, it says a lot.
It really does speak volumes about his mindset. Thinking big, paradigm shifts, achieving what looks impossible.
And right at the core of that vision, the absolute center, is his thesis. Lossless long context is everything.
Explain that a bit. What does lossless long context mean for, the average user?
Basically, he believes the future AI isn't just bigger or faster models. It's about creating AI that can hold on to information perfectly, maintain context across really long, complex interactions. Imagine an AI that never forgets a detail you told it, no matter how long you've been talking or how many different things you've asked it to do.
Okay, that sounds useful.
It's what makes AI truly personal, truly useful, and crucially reliable over time, instead of starting fresh every few interactions.
You know that feeling, that frustration when you have to repeat yourself to an AI? Because it just forgot something you said earlier.
We've all been there.
Yang Zhilin basically saw that, not as a limitation, but as a solvable problem. And Kimi K2, that's his proof of concept. But having a vision is one thing. Executing it at a trillion parameter scale, that's where the breakthrough gets truly remarkable. Let's get into that. What makes Kimi K2 a genuine technical revolution? Because, as you said, Yang Zhilin didn't just build another big AI model. He seems to have cracked fundamental problems that have been a real headache for, every major AI company.
Exactly. So Kimi K2 is, yes, a 1 trillion parameter model, but it's built using a mixture of experts architecture, MOE.
Right, MOE. We've talked about that before, like DeepSeek.
Think of it like a team of highly specialized mini AIs. The system intelligently routes parts of your query to the best expert for that specific task. Makes it incredibly efficient.
Okay.
So only about 32 billion of its parameters are active for any given token. And it uses 384 experts. That's quite a few more than DeepSeek V3's 256. But honestly, the really crucial breakthrough here, it's what Yang calls zero training instability.
Zero training instability. Okay, that sounds almost too good to be true for anyone working in AI. Why is instability such a big deal?
Oh, it's the absolute bane of large language models.
Okay.
As these models get huge, like trillions of parameters, they become exponentially harder to train reliably. Training instability means models just collapse, gradients explode, training runs fail completely, sometimes after weeks of incredibly expensive compute time.
Millions of dollars down the drain.
Exactly. Millions wasted for companies like OpenAI, Google, Anthropic. It's like trying to, I don't know, balance a massive complex structure on a pinpoint. It often just crashes, wasting huge amounts of resources.
So how did Yang solve this?
His team developed something called MuonClip. It's a novel optimizer, basically an extension of the muon algorithm, but it adds a specific Q-clip mechanism. They found that traditional methods, things like logit soft capping or query key normalization, they just weren't cutting it reliably at the trillion parameter scale. But MuonClip, it enabled them to train Kimi K2 on an unprecedented 15.5 trillion tokens with, and this is the kicker, literally zero training instability.
Zero, like none.
According to their paper, zero. No failed runs, no collapse gradients, no throwing away weeks of compute and starting over.
That is genuinely a game changer. I mean, this isn't just about saving money, though that's huge. It feels like it fundamentally redefines how AI R&D budgets might get allocated globally. It shifts the advantage towards maybe capital-efficient innovation rather than just throwing more raw compute power at the problem.
It could very well do that. And the architectural innovations, they don't actually stop there. Kimi K2 uses 64 attention heads. DeepSeek used 128.
Fewer heads. What does that mean in practice?
Well, this kind of technical wizardry, it boils down to incredible efficiency. Using fewer heads means less memory usage, about 5 GB less per rank, they report. They also have a first-layer dense FFN, which apparently improves router balance, making the MoE work better. And no expert grouping, allowing for optimal expert selection for each token.
So more efficient routing, less memory.
Right. And the net result, despite Kimi K2 being about 50% larger in terms of parameters than some competitors, these innovations lead to a net 2.5 GB memory reduction per rank. And that translates directly into lower inference costs. Cheaper to run, basically.
Cheaper to train, cheaper to run. That's compelling.
And perhaps the most profound innovation, conceptually at least, is something they call agentic training.
Agentic training. Okay, what's that?
So instead of just teaching the AI to have a conversation, to chat back and forth, Kimi K2 was specifically trained to act, to behave autonomously. Think of it like teaching a personal assistant not just to answer your questions, but to actually plan and carry out complex, multi-step tasks for you.
How do you train for that?
It involves several things. Large-scale data synthesis across hundreds of different domains. Integration of something called MCP tools, which simulate real-world scenarios and tool use. Self-judging reinforcement learning, so the model learns to evaluate its own performance on both factual and creative tasks. And rubric-based evaluation to ensure a consistent quality assessment during training. It's a whole different approach.
Okay, here's something I want you, the listener, to consider. While Western AI companies have often, focused on scaling up existing architectures, just adding more compute power, Yang Zhilin seems to have redesigned the training process itself from the ground up. Which approach? Well, which approach do you think will truly define the future of AI development? It's a fascinating question. Let's shift focus now. We've talked tech, let's talk impact. The tangible stuff. Kimi K2's performance and its pricing, because both seem genuinely disruptive.
They really are. On the coding side, Kimi K2 is putting up some very strong numbers. On Live Code Bench, it scored 53.7%. Compare that to Claude Opus 4 at 47.4%, or GPT 4.1 at 44.7%.
So ahead there.
Clearly ahead. On SWE Bench Verified, which is another tough coding benchmark, it hit 65.8%. That's well above GPT 4.1's 54.6%.
Right.
And it's actually getting close to Claude Sonnet 4's 72.7%. And for math tasks on Math 500, Kimi K2 got a 97.4% score. GPT 4.1 was 92.4%. So consistently strong performance on these technical tasks.
Impressive benchmarks.
But here's where it gets, I think, really interesting. Kimi K2 isn't just about technical benchmarks. It also seems to excel in areas like creative writing and emotional intelligence.
Emotional intelligence, how do you even benchmark that?
There are benchmarks for it, like EQ Bench 3,
Hmm.
and Kimi K2 ranked #1 on that specific benchmark. It beat out GPT-4o, Claude, Gemini.
Wow.
And it's also rated as a creative writing champion in some evaluations, scoring 8.56 versus, say, O3 Pro's 8.44. And anecdotally, users are describing its conversational style. They use the term zero sycophancy. It feels more natural, maybe more human in its interactions, less like it's just trying to please you.
Okay, stop and think about what this means for you, the user. A Chinese AI model is demonstrating, arguably, higher emotional intelligence and creativity than some of the top Western alternatives. That's not just a technical win, is it? It feels like a fundamental challenge to some prevailing assumptions about AI development and what these models are capable of.
It certainly challenges some narratives, and then you layer on the economic disruption, which is truly remarkable.
The cost. Let's talk numbers.
Okay. Kimi K2 is priced at just $0.15, 15 cents per million input tokens, specifically for cache hits, and 2.50s per million output tokens.
15 cents and 250 per million. How does that compare?
Let's take Claude Opus 4. Its inputs are 15 per million dollar tokens. So Kimi K2 is 100 times cheaper on input.
100 times.
100 times.
Yeah.
And Claude Opus 4 outputs are 75 per million dollar tokens. Kimi K2's $2.50 is 30 times cheaper on output.
That's not just undercutting the market, that's blowing it up.
It's incredibly aggressive pricing.
Yeah.
And here's the real kicker. If you just use the Kimi app, it's completely free.
Free for end users. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the market response, it was immediate. Within days of launch, Kimi K2 jumped to number 14 on OpenRouter.
Yeah.
That put it ahead of models like Grok 4 and GPT 4.1. It also had the highest download rate on Hugging Face right after it was released.
So developers and businesses are noticing.
Absolutely. This combination, superior performance in key areas, coupled with that incredibly aggressive pricing, it's clearly resonating.
This really does feel like more than just competitive pricing. It's almost like a economic warfare in the AI space. Yang Zhilin is basically showing they can deliver, arguably, superior AI for a tiny fraction of the cost. So here's the question, right? The question millions of developers and businesses are suddenly facing. If you can get demonstrably better AI performance, potentially for free from a Chinese company, or pay hundreds of dollars a month for Western alternatives that might not even match up, what do you choose? That's the dilemma. And the impact, of course, goes way beyond just market share and pricing models. This model, Kimi K2, emerging from China with these capabilities, it inevitably brings up some profound geopolitical questions. It challenges a lot of long-held assumptions about global AI leadership.
Absolutely. You have to remember the context. The U.S. has implemented increasingly strict chip sanctions, right? Export controls on advanced chips like H100s, restrictions on manufacturing through TSMC, limits on transferring knowledge about AI chip architecture, all explicitly designed to impede Chinese AI development.
To slow them down.
Exactly. But here's the paradox. Despite these really strict sanctions, what we're seeing is apparently accelerated Chinese innovation. We saw DeepSeek in January, now Kimi K2 in July. And these aren't just, catching up models. In several key aspects, they appear superior.
Right.
There was a comment by machine learning researcher Nathan Lambert. He noted Kimi K2 seems like more of a prequel than a one-off fluke. It suggests systematic Chinese AI advancement, not just these isolated hits.
So it's not just Moonshot and DeepSeek.
No, definitely not. Multiple other Chinese companies are reaching frontier performance levels. Tencent's Hunyuan model, for instance, was described by Anthropic's Jack Clark as, by some measures, world-class. Alibaba's Qwen 2.5 is also pushing boundaries, getting very close to leading Western models. And you have the Chinese government putting serious resources behind this too, an $8.2 billion AI fund dedicated to supporting systematic research.
What's fascinating here is the idea that these sanctions, they might actually be accelerating Chinese AI innovation rather than hindering it. It's counterintuitive, but...
How so?
Well, think about it. If you can't get easy access to the absolute latest, most powerful chips, maybe you're forced to innovate more on the algorithm side to become more efficient.
Right. Innovation born from constraint.
Exactly. And if you can't just license the top Western models, well, you're basically compelled to build better ones yourself. Yang Zhilin's approach with Kimi K2 seems like a prime example of this dynamic. Instead of just trying to match Western compute power, which the sanctions make harder, he focused on innovating the training algorithms to get better results with less compute. That's not just competitive, that's strategically really potent.
And there are definite signs that Western AI companies are paying close attention. There's speculation, for example, that Kimi K2's release might have influenced OpenAI's decision to delay their own open-source model.
Interesting timing, yeah.
And Meta's Llama 4, while strong, certainly looks perhaps less competitive against some of these new Chinese alternatives in certain areas. There seems to be a growing realization that restricting compute hasn't stopped Chinese AI progress. If anything, it might have forced an innovation path that makes their models more economically viable in the long run.
So where does this lead?
Well, looking ahead, you could imagine a few possible trajectories. One is uh, genuine Chinese AI leadership in certain key domains, maybe agentic intelligence, maybe long context processing where they seem focused.
Okay.
Another possibility is the emergence of sort of divergent AI ecosystems. You might have Chinese AI primarily serving markets in Asia, Africa, South America, while Western AI dominates elsewhere, leading to different standards, different capabilities. Or perhaps the most optimistic view is that this intensified competition just accelerates innovation globally. Everyone pushes harder, learns from each other, and the whole field moves forward faster.
So which scenario do you, the listener, think is most likely? And maybe more importantly, what does it actually mean for global technology development when the most advanced open source AI models, the ones anyone can build on, are increasingly coming from China? It's something to really mull over. But let's bring it back to Kimi K2 itself for a moment. Because what makes it feel truly revolutionary isn't just the benchmarks or the price tag. It's that, as you mentioned, Yang Zhilin seems to have purpose-built it for agentic intelligence.
Right. It's designed for agency.
This isn't just a conversational AI that can, sometimes do tasks if you phrase it right. This feels like an AI designed from the ground up for autonomous work.
That's the core idea. Traditional AI models, they're mostly optimized for chat, right? You ask a question, it gives an answer, you ask another question, back and forth.
Yeah, conversational loops.
Kimi K2, on the other hand, seems optimized for agency. What that means is it's designed to understand complex goals, not just simple prompts, to plan multi-step approaches to achieve those goals, to execute tasks autonomously, using tools if needed, and, crucially, to adapt if the plan needs to change mid-task.
And that goes back to the training.
Exactly. That agentic training pipeline, we discussed the MCP tool integration for simulating real-world actions, the multi-domain task synthesis covering hundreds of professional scenarios, the self-evaluation capabilities, the rubric-based assessment, and underlying it all, that long context maintenance to keep track of everything across complex workflows.
Which connects directly back, again, to Yang's big idea, lossless long context.
Precisely. You can't have truly effective agentic AI if it forgets what it was doing halfway through a complex multi-hour task. You need that perfect context maintenance. And that's exactly what Kimi K2 was reportedly designed to achieve.
Okay, think about the implications of that for you and your work. Current AI tools, they're great for individual tasks, right? Write this email, debug this bit of code, summarize this document, analyze this spreadsheet.
Single-shot tasks, mostly.
Yeah. But agentic AI, that could potentially handle complex projects. Something like research our top 3 market competitors, develop a detailed go-to-market strategy comparing our product, create the presentation materials for the board, and draft a preliminary implementation timeline.
It's a whole different level of capability. So instead of you manually coordinating all those steps, the research, the analysis, the writing, the planning of an AI, like Kimi K2, theoretically, could autonomously gather the data, analyze competitor strategies, draft the presentation, suggest timelines, essentially acting as your project manager from start to finish.
We're not just talking about slightly better chatbots anymore, are we?
No. We're talking about AI potentially functioning as autonomous colleagues, handling substantial professional responsibilities with potentially minimal human oversight, which in theory frees up human creativity and effort for higher-level strategic thinking, problem-solving, things machines aren't good at yet.
This feels like it fundamentally shifts the competitive landscape again. While maybe Western companies are still perfecting conversational AI, it sounds like Chinese companies like Moonshot are already building for the next generation of AI capability. They're not just aiming to catch up. They really are trying to leapfrog.
It appears so. Yang Zhilin isn't just building, incrementally better AI models. He seems to be laying the foundation for a future where AI agents handle a significant amount of professional work autonomously. And he's doing it, seemingly, faster, cheaper, and maybe more effectively than many people expected was possible right now.
So, following that precedent set by DeepSeek just months ago, Kimi K2 really does signify, it feels like, a fundamental shift in technological leadership. Yang Zhilin and his team at Moonshot AI, they're not just competing with Silicon Valley anymore. They seem to be actively redefining what's possible in the entire AI landscape.
And whether this ultimately leads to healthy global competition that benefits everyone, Or perhaps a more concerning technological divergence between different blocs? Well, that remains to be seen. It's early days.
But one thing feels certain, doesn't it?
What's that?
The age of assumed Western AI dominance, well, that seems to be concluding, and the era of truly global AI innovation, with major players emerging from different regions, that feels like it's just beginning.
It's definitely a new chapter.
The future of artificial intelligence is being written right now as we speak, and it's proving to be far more complex and far more competitive than perhaps anyone predicted even a year ago.